Good morning. Welcome to the Point. In Lansing, the focus is getting a budget negotiated, and that will take several weeks to a few months. But in the meantime, lawmakers are introducing bills that deal with specific problems they think need to be addressed. One such bill was introduced this week. Representative Michelle Hodinga from Wexford County is talking about daylight saving time. Representative, every year we hear people talk about daylight saving time. And it's generally some complaint because it's difficult for school kids and their schedules, or people are just inconvenienced, or you lose an hour of sleep and it's hard to get caught up. And very frequently, members of the legislature say, well, wait a minute, there might be a better way. This year, you're the legislator. So tell me how this came about. What made you decide to try to do something about daylight saving time?
Well, now Senator Pete Lucido had this bill in the House last year, and I co-sponsored it. And I was very vocal and a huge advocate of it, but he just was not able to get a committee hearing on it. So it just sat there and died. So I knew this year I wanted to be part of it, and no one else was picking it up, so I just ran with it.
The argument for daylight saving time that started however long ago was that in order for things like kids waiting at the school buses so they didn't have to do it in the dark, and for a lot for agriculturalists, I think some of them liked it a lot. But it has come this year particularly under fire for whatever reason. Perhaps social media helps with that. So your first incarnation of the bill was to just stay on whatever, standard time.
Yes.
And so that was Bill 4303, which is laying right here. But since then, in talking to your colleagues and some of your constituents, you've modified that. Tell me about that.
So when I introduced the bill, I don't care which way we go with it. We stay in daylight savings time or we stay in standard time. I didn't care. I just wanted the ritual, the biannual ritual of changing the clocks to stop. So I didn't really care, but the people did care, because once the bill was introduced and through social media, it really took, it blew up, so to speak. And people were very adamant to stay in daylight savings time. And then, of course, our chair president tweeted out that he was fine with that at the federal level. So this week we are going to have a hearing on keeping daylight savings time.
So there's a very important component there, and perhaps selfishly I will point this out, that if the nation stayed on daylight saving time, that would be standardized and that would make things a lot simpler. But if, for example, it was just a state like Michigan, from a television perspective, that would play havoc with primetime schedules, right?
Yes.
Because it all originates from the East Coast. So it is kind of complex when you start thinking about this.
It truly is a federal issue. I've said that for a lot of years. This is a federal issue. But the states are taking it upon themselves to be more proactive. We're not getting maybe a whole lot done at the federal level. And so 3 other states, we have Arizona, Hawaii, California, who have all moved to standard time, and now Florida has done the same thing. So we would be in line with Florida. I think when one state makes the bold move of the change, states around it will follow. I hope.
What kind of objections do you hear from people about having the switch twice a year? Because inevitably somebody misses an appointment or somebody is late, or less often early, but I suspect that people are late.
Yeah, and to be clear, this would, I do believe, hinder a little bit with trading and commodities trading and in business. I do have that little fear. That is the downfall if the states around us do not follow. And so it should be a cohesive amount of states together doing this. But I'm not hearing a whole lot of people just want it to stop. They just want it to end, the time change.
When you talk about picking this up, you co-sponsored it last year. And you are going to get a hearing on it this year.
Yes, sir.
So that's a step further than you got last year. What do you hear from your colleagues? What are they saying about it?
I'm anxious to talk to my colleagues today. This just got introduced, and over the weekend it became a huge topic, and the media has picked it up. And so I'm sure I'll be hearing from my colleagues. I know of 2 that do not support it already. So
In thinking about this in terms of being a regional issue, if you were successful here, is this the kind of thing that you might, as a legislator, reach out to other legislators in other states and say, hey, look, we took the step, how about you?
Absolutely. In New York and New Jersey, some of the eastern states, they did this. They tried to bring a coalition of states. And when I was doing my research on this, almost every state in the nation has similar legislation. So I know there's a will to want to do it. I think it just takes bold legislators to stand up and let's get it done.
This is playing out at a time when there are big things on the table out there. We've been talking about a 45-cent a gallon gasoline tax, a $60 billion budget that was delivered just last week. You've been here long enough to see how the process goes. How hard is it to get recognition, make a little noise when all of that other is out there sucking all the air out of the room?
And you really nailed it on the head that some people have said to me, listen, the state has bigger things to do. I just remind them as legislators, we're good multitaskers. We tend to get a lot done at once. I do believe auto no-fault insurance, trying to get that done is a priority for me personally as a legislator. So I get it. When people say we've got bigger things to concentrate on, I really understand.
But this is still one that gets, as we call some of these stories in our business, it's a talker. I mean, and this is something that you're from Wexford County. I'm sure a lot of your constituents are talking about this as well. And it might be, at long last, that this has found a time, you think?
Yeah. I believe so. I do believe with social media, and especially again with the president's tweet, we've got a lot of talk happening, and this would be the time.
I'm going to change subjects for just a little bit because you brought up something else that I'm sure is important to your constituency as it is in the whole state. And while this was the purpose of our interview, I want to talk just for a minute about auto no fault. You said that's a priority for you, and it is for many of your colleagues. There's no question that we've heard about it, and we've heard about it in a bipartisan way. Now, that doesn't mean that there is a bipartisan solution, but there is a will to come to a solution, though it may be different from region to region and Republican to Democrat and all of that. Early on, are you hearing people talk seriously about this? Because we talked about it before, and as I pointed out, I've been here through several incarnations of this, and nothing has really ever happened. But it seems like, at least from an outsider looking in, that there is serious conversation. Is that your take as a member?
I do believe we're more serious than ever. Coming in as a freshman, a few years ago, I thought, this is going to be easy. We have the highest rates in the nation. This is going to be simple. Could not imagine sitting here 2 years later that we could not get this done last year. Very disappointing. I do sit on the insurance committee. It is a passion of mine to get this done, and Jason Wentworth, Representative Wentworth, is heading this up, and I have faith in him. He's being very transparent through this process, and he's handling it in a way that I haven't seen done here before. So I'm hopeful. I'm more hopeful this year than I was last year.
He has a bipartisan group that's looking at this, and so there's one step by involving both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
What is the end goal? I mean, obviously, and I've said this a few times on this show, I rarely hear people complaining about their coverage.
Right.
But you really hear them complaining about the rates.
Yes.
But it would follow that coverage probably changes if you lower the rates. So it's not going to be a quick or easy solution, but what do you think it looks like?
I won't support anything that is not guaranteed to lower rates. I believe in the free market. And I also believe we're not going to leave people alongside the road injured. There is ways to take care of our people, the seriously injured, and pull the rates down. And it's a huge, giant puzzle. And so we need all those pieces together, but not everybody, some of the Democrats believe on some of the pieces, and there's this tug of war back and forth. We need to get this puzzle figured out, and with all those pieces together, I truly believe we can protect the injured and we can lower the rates.
Well, and you talk about not just Republicans and Democrats, but there are differences regionally, and then you have all of the different stakeholders beyond perhaps the most important stakeholder, which are the policyholders, but they're the insurance companies and the lawyers and the providers and the doctors, and so it's not like this is a quick fix.
Absolutely, and I do understand the representatives who represent the Detroit area. They are paying the highest rates in the nation, even worse than ours, and I thought ours were bad. So they're very concerned with the redlining, the so-called redlining. So I'm anxious to see what they bring forth.
And finally, a perspective question, since you have been here. This is divided government. First time you've served as such, and the first time we've seen that in 8 years here in Lansing. Does that make coming to a compromise more or less difficult? Understanding that as Republicans, you're not going to get everything you want from Democratic governor, and a Democratic governor who has the advantage of having served in the legislature realizes that a Republican legislature isn't going to give her everything she wants. So does compromise become, well, it certainly becomes more necessary. Does it become any easier?
Well, I didn't like everything Governor Snyder did, so I'm sure I'm not going to like everything this governor does. But she's a politician, and she's served for a long time. She knows it takes compromise, and as I'm serving, I realize you have to give and take while you're still sticking to your principles. And I think there is room for compromise to get things done. I believe that.
Any number of bills will be introduced in the next several weeks. Many will never get a hearing, and some that do will never get a final vote. We'll talk more about that at the end of the show. Coming up next, another bill introduction, To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Another bill introduced this past week was from Macomb County's William Sowerby. The representative introduced a bill that would change something that happened in the last session. He talks about that this morning. Representative, let's start talking about the process before we get to what you would like to accomplish with, I believe you're calling it Repeal the Steal.
Correct.
There was a ballot initiative, an initiative petition put forward by a group. Signatures were gained. Well, the language was first approved, and it was headed for the ballot in November of last year. But there's a process that can happen in between there. Talk to me about what the legislature can do with a certified ballot initiative that has already gained enough signatures and been certified for the ballot.
So the group One Fair Wage got 375,000 signatures on their petition drive. Secretary of State approved 285,000 of those signatures. Board of Canvassers of the state approved the language. It was going on the November ballot. So the law does allow for the legislature to then act on that petition drive once those other things have all been verified, and they can act to approve that measure that was going to be on the ballot drive. So that was done in September, and the State House as well as the State Senate passed it. It does not need the signature of the governor to do that. So that's what happened in September.
So you said something very important. The House and the Senate can vote to approve. They cannot vote to disapprove, because if they do, then it still goes to the ballot, right?
Correct.
So that process was done. So in a normal circumstance, you would say, okay, deal done, we'll move on. We have an election. A number of other ballot initiatives do pass at the ballot box. It's a big change election. Then we move into lame duck, and that is where changes were made to the original ballot language that was almost certain to happen. I mean, the writing was on the wall. But very early on, many like you said, wait a minute, that's not the way that's supposed to work. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Attorney General's office has been asked to offer an opinion on whether or not you can do that. As of this moment, I don't believe she has. But what happened in lame duck?
So the steal of this money of minimum wage happened in lame duck in December on a partisan basis. So the Republicans in both the State House and the State Senate voted to change and gut what they passed in September and just basically put back into play what the original minimum wage law was
already
in the
on the
state
books.
And moving forward. So people who had, worked hard to get those petitions signed, people who in September thought they were getting a minimum wage increase come January, those people lost those wages in lame duck, and thus what I feel was the real steal that occurred. That's what brought about my Repeal the Steal bill that I introduced, which was to put back into place what the petition drive originally requested.
So when I say the writing was on the wall, when the legislature took this up, there was every expectation on most observers' parts that they would not pass it intact and leave it intact. And the discussion about whether or not they could do that started even before that process began. And as I mentioned, the Attorney General has since been asked to issue an opinion, and there are those who are considering taking legal action in the courts, which, again, as of this moment, hasn't happened. Now, your action has happened. What would it take to change this back? Does this take a simple majority vote to change it back?
This takes a simple majority vote to take it back. That's all this bill does, what I call the repeal of the steal. So, keep in mind that a lot of these people, including the Republicans, already voted for this bill, which I have in place back in September. So these people, including leadership in the Republican caucus, has already voted to say, yes, let's give this minimum wage increase a go and move it forward. So just as a simple majority, this can happen again.
The problem is obviously that the Republican majority from the last session, some of which are still here, many of which have gone, obviously decided they wanted to make that change. What is the case you make to Republicans, because you obviously have to have some Republican votes to get to a simple majority? What is the case that you make to Republicans, and maybe even to some of your own colleagues, though I suspect most Democrats would support your measure without having asked them, I assume that. What do you have to say to Republicans, however many you'll need, to get to 56 in the House, at 19 over in the Senate, to convince them that they should change the vote, maybe not their own personal vote, maybe you talk to new members, but change the vote of the leadership from the last session?
Well, keep in mind, this is a gradual increase as the original petition drive and the vote in September said. So it would raise to $10 here in this year, and then go up to $12 by 2022. It's a gradual increase. So it's not anything hardship on any employer's pocketbook, but it also gives hope to minimum wage workers that they too will rise in this economy. There are a lot of people in this state who are not feeling the effects of any kind of improvement in their lives. We have over 1 million people that are earning $12 or less an hour in this state. So if you take those people and look at 40 hours a week that you'd be earning this minimum wage, here in 2019, that means $88 a month in lost wages. That means a lot in food and staples in your house when you're working those kind of hours and that minimum wage. So I think that it's only fair that we give these raises to these people. If you look at the tipped worker is only making 38% of what the current minimum wage is. They rely on the goodness of strangers, their customers, to add salary in their pockets through tips. How is that right that these tipped workers should rely on the kindness of strangers to help them get through life? And at the same time, if we have this increase, this will take a burden off the state in the programs that we offer to persons of low income that supports them getting through life with other types of care. This will help take those dollars off the state coffers if we increase these people's salaries. It's not a huge increase. $12 an hour by 2022 is a small increase when you look at what people's needs are, and it will help fuel the economy because these workers add those dollars back into our economy. They aren't out traveling to other states. They're just barely getting by, but they're going to feed this economy and help their local communities.
So talk to me about the process. You introduce a bill. It will be assigned to a committee. Has it yet been assigned?
Yes, it has. I'm not sure exactly which committee it's gone to.
So then the process would be to get to a committee hearing. So here are the practical applications of that. All of the committee chairmen in the House of Representatives are Republicans by nature of them being in charge of the majority, having the majority, so all of the chairmen are Republicans. How confident are you that Republicans will give a bill like this a hearing?
I think that any of these chair people in the House and in the Senate have constituents that are in this situation, a lot of constituents. You walk into any restaurant in your community. These are tipped workers barely surviving. They vote too. These are your constituents. You need to support these people. And the minimum wage workers, if they're caretakers in the healthcare arena or long-term care arenas, they're doing the work as student aides. They're helping out in the schools. These are all minimum wage workers, and they're in every single one of our districts, Democrat, Republican districts. These people just want to get by, and if those chair people of these committees see these workers out there and they see them every day, they know how this can help make a difference in their lives, and again, raise this economy and help these people add something back to themselves in this rising economy.
As I sit here, I'm reminded of some of the conversation going back to lame duck. So this is a question that you don't have to answer necessarily, because I just thought of it as we were talking, regardless of the outcome of this bill. Would you advocate for one of your colleagues to introduce legislation that would prohibit the legislature, specifically by statute, from passing an initiative petition, a citizen-driven bill that is put forward? Would you entertain the idea of having legislation that would prohibit the legislature from passing and then fundamentally changing such an initiative petition?
So what I think you're just asking is, so what happened in last September, the statute that allowed the legislature to do something to change that process.
Right.
I'm not sure what that looks like, but certainly needs to be considered to, help those people who put petition drives together, to put them on the ballot, that a matter of just a mere, in this case, 60 votes in the House changed what that intention of that petition drive of 375,000 people signed. So yes, I would consider looking at that, and I think others would as well. I just don't know what that process looks like.
And finally, I ask everybody this because it's a new day in Lansing. We have, for the first time in 8 years, divided government. And the question I ask virtually every lawmaker is this: because compromise will be the only way anything gets done, because Republicans will have to compromise with Democratic governor, Democratic governor is going to have to compromise with a Republican legislature, is there a better chance to come up with better solutions, with good solutions, because everybody has to give up a little bit and everybody gets a little bit?
Look, I came out of serving in local government back in my community for a number of years. You couldn't get anything done without, creating that sausage and then looking at how it looks and tastes at the end. You have to work with your colleagues, and you're not all going to get along. You're not all going to agree. But in the end, if it's for the good of the community, good for the state, you can make this happen. And it's the only way that this divided government will work. I think the governor, with her experience here in the state legislature, knows how it works. And I think that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle know what we're going to expect of the governor. And I think that we can make things work. Otherwise, we're going to have gridlock just like they have in Washington. I don't expect that to happen here in Lansing.
Those are just two of dozens of bills that will be introduced in the next few weeks. When we come back, a final word about that process, to the point. Both of the bills we talked about this morning may face an uphill battle. Getting Republicans to overturn what a Republican legislature did could be tough, and the complexities of changing daylight saving time could be more than the legislature can take on. But we'll continue to follow this and keep you updated. To the point.